Thank you, Mr. McKaiser. So, sticking with yesterday's pattern, I was born and raised in the AME Church, which for those of you who may not be familiar with it, that's the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So for that reason, I'm going to stay behind the lectern, and I will stick precisely to my prepared remarks. Otherwise, depending upon how the Spirit moves me this morning, we could be hopelessly off schedule, and despite this incredible moderator, I fear we could never recover the time. So I'm going to try to behave, recognize the Spirit as well, and also the importance of this conference. So with that, let me just say good morning. I really am very, very pleased to be with you today. I also want to thank my very good friend and colleague, Bill Moses, from the Kresge Foundation. And as Bill mentioned, we do a lot of things together in the U.S. And I had contacted Bill, and I knew he was coming to South Africa, and just asked if I could join him this trip, really to listen and learn from you. Bill asked me to consider speaking at the conference, and so a special thank you to Sheila and Inyatelo for extending the invitation to speak today. So thank you for that. And indeed, it really is an honor for me to address such a distinguished audience, particularly in this global era that we live in. We live and work in a global society. Our world is truly a shared world, one that is shrinking, flattening, and becoming more tightly interconnected each day. Every satellite news feed, every international financial transaction, every tweet and Facebook posting brings us closer together as a global family. And we really must take every opportunity to listen to and learn from each other. And that's certainly true in the area of education. And of course, that's why I'm here today. I believe the way forward for higher education, business, philanthropy, NGOs, and governments, whether in the United States or South Africa, is to come together and collectively focus on 21st century students. That's what the Achieving the Dream initiative did almost 10 years ago. And they are largely successful today because they and their partners in the groups I just mentioned have really developed a laser-like focus on increasing success for 21st century students. And today at Lumina Foundation, we call this tapping into the power of 21st century students. We're thinking about the challenge of increasing student success every day and in all 50 states, because it is very much a national challenge in the US, just as it is in South Africa's 9 provinces. So, what can someone from the US who hasn't worked on a campus now, I was telling John yesterday, in almost 20 years, representing an upstart foundation, we're just concluding our 13th year, and what can I possibly tell you, especially listening to the conversation yesterday, that you really already don't know? But if you'll bear with me, I hope I can offer a somewhat new perspective on the important work we all share, and that is helping more of today's students succeed in higher education, in the workforce, and in life. Admittedly, that's a very broad topic, one that raises some important questions, such as, who are today's students? How can we best help them succeed? And what does success really mean anyway? In the time that I have, I will briefly address all three of these points, but before I delve too deeply into those details, let me first offer a little background about the organization I represent. Lumina Foundation is a domestically focused foundation based in Indianapolis. We have assets of about $1 billion, a little bit more, less depending on the market day to day. Our work, as with Kresge, includes significant grant making, as is true of most U.S. foundations. But we also see ourselves as a national goal setter, thought leader, framework developer, and honest broker as they pertain to our tightly focused mission, which is to enroll and graduate more students from college, particularly low-income students, students of color, first-generation college students like me, and adult learners. And in fact, we are the largest foundation in the U.S. that focuses exclusively on that mission. We pursue our mission in a very focused way. All of our energy, resources are focused on the achievement of one ambitious but specific goal. By 2025, we want 60% of the American population to hold high-quality post-secondary degrees and credentials. Right now, that figure is about 40% of the U.S. population actually has a two-year degree. And we believe our plan how to achieve this goal is really a blueprint for what needs to happen in the U.S. in order to reach the goal of 60% by 2025. And just as an aside, I would also submit to you that a similar goal should be jointly considered by all of the groups represented at this conference. So how do we pursue our mission? Simply put, we suggest that three critical outcomes must happen immediately and concurrently. First, students must be prepared academically, financially, and socially for success in education beyond high school. All three of these areas must be addressed as co-equals. If they're not, research shows that the path to and through college becomes exceedingly difficult to navigate. Second, higher education success and completion rates must be improved significantly. Here, the goal is not merely to push students through college, but to help them achieve high-quality credentials that will be useful to them in the 21st century workforce. And third, post-secondary institutions and systems must become more efficient, more innovative, and more cost-effective. These gains in productivity are vital because they will increase capacity and allow the system to provide high-quality education to many more students. So that's Lumina's plan and approach, working simultaneously on all three outcomes and with a variety of stakeholders as a means of reaching the big goal of 60% attainment. Again, I'll say high-quality degrees and credentials. And if there's one thing we've learned in the work we've done so far, it is that we won't reach the big goal unless we concentrate now on serving 21st century students, the students of today and tomorrow, not those of yesterday. In many ways, the higher education systems in both of our countries were built for the 19th century. Some might even say the 18th century. Borrowing on their tradition from medieval Europe, they were designed to educate a favored few, the sons, and yes, back then it was almost exclusively the sons of the wealthy elite. And there's another problem. Over the decades, too little has changed behind those college doors. Systems, structures, and practices have not adapted quickly enough to properly and productively serve this new generation of 21st century students, a group more diverse and variable than any 18th or 19th century college professor could ever have imagined. In the US, 21st century students run the gamut racially, ethnically, and socially, from high school graduate to second career retiree, from part-time distance learner to full-time resident student, from GED completer to certificate seeker to evening MBA student to PhD candidate, with roots in every country from Mexico to Asia to Africa. And I suspect there are similar groups of 21st century students right here in South Africa. And going further, speaking of these people as 21st century students isn't mere wordplay. This is about substance, not semantics. We all must recognize 21st century students as essential to our future. We must change the dialogue from a deficit model to a growth model, one in which all sectors, business, industry, government, education institutions, and communities see these students as future leaders of our nations, taxpayers, and contributors to the standard of living that we all cherish. And that leads me to the second question that I posed at the beginning of my remarks. How can we best help them succeed? Clearly, no one-size-fits-all system of higher education will work for 21st century students. To reach the big goal in the US, and I'll say for a second time, something comparable in South Africa, all types of students need to succeed, and they must succeed in far greater numbers. That means we need a student-centered system, one that is flexible, accessible, and accountable and committed to quality. Such a system must meet each student where she is and offer support she needs to succeed. It must ensure quality by fostering genuine student learning, not mere program completion. It must ensure that students are truly prepared for work and for life in an increasingly global society. These factors are what will define a higher education system that serves the 21st century student well. A responsive system, one that acts as an effective engine for the development of our two countries' most precious national resource, human capital. Finally, the third question that I posed is arguably the most important. What do we mean by student success? I've talked about who are today's students and what we can do to help them succeed, and I hope I've shed a bit of light on both. But it's that third question, how to define the high-quality credential that clearly identifies a successful student. That is a question that is increasingly on our minds at Lumina Foundation. So, what is a high-quality credential? That, of course, is a complex question and one that is the subject of great debate within and across countries and nations. For us at Lumina Foundation, we have chosen a definition that is simple and straightforward. High-quality degrees, certificates, and credentials have well-defined, transparent learning outcomes that lead to further education and employment. Let me restate that. Clear, transparent learning outcomes that lead to further education and employment. It's become clear to us, and we think to anyone who thoughtfully considers the challenges facing higher education in any country, that the current systems won't get us where we need to go in the 21st century global society. Yes, they will serve some students well, but they simply cannot conduct business as usual and serve the vast numbers of students who must be served if we are to reach the big goal in the US, and in case you missed it, I'm going to say it a third time, something comparable here in South Africa. Students, employers, and education and community leaders like you must all have a clear and shared understanding of the skills, knowledge, and abilities represented by each credential that a student might earn. This is really the key to defining and measuring what success means. Really, though, all 3 points and questions I pose can effectively be wrapped up in one central idea, and it's that one point, the idea that higher education systems must be student-centered rather than institution-focused. That central concept, meeting the needs of students, is the one I can't emphasize enough. But that's the key to building sustainable relationships between higher education and all of its stakeholders. In closing, stated quite simply, 21st century students increasingly are forming the backbone of our collective economies, civic well-being, and prosperity. I think what we all want is for them to get a quality higher education that a degree or credential represents. It needs to be transparent and focused on learning. And we want them to get there through a productive system of higher education, one that efficiently and effectively delivers higher education at a reasonable cost. And that way, the dramatically larger numbers of students will have the opportunity not only to enroll in, but succeed in higher ed, and that is what employers and business are going to demand. Thank you so much for your consideration.